Okay guys, I'm gonna give this a shot. I did it a little bit late. The winds picked up, the boaters are out, and they're super annoying. I caught some really good fish this morning. All 20, 30 feet of water on a jig, every single fish. I caught one on a crank. I did catch one on a deep diving crank, but everything else was on a jig. That's all I could catch them on. And I'm happy with that. It was a freaking awesome bite. Battle Baits jig, that's what we're gonna talk. Okay, so I've had a ton of question about what type of line do I use. Well, in what scenario, when am I using this line, when am I using braid, when am I using monofilament, all these things. So this is my perspective. This is what I use. For me, it's tried and true, and I'll probably never will switch. A lot of people ask me, fluorocarbon or monofilament? And don't get me wrong, they both have their purposes, but I don't touch monofilament, ever. You will not see me ever use monofilament. I feel like fluorocarbon is for underwater, and braid is for top water. Now, a lot of people use monofilament, maybe 20, 30, or whatever pound monofilament for their top water, because monofilament floats compared to the fluorocarbon that sinks. So if I'm throwing anything pretty much underwater, I will have fluorocarbon tied on. Now, for my spinning rods, it might be a little bit different. I see a lot of people asking me, like, I see you have braid tied on, and I always have ran braid, and then I've tied leaders. I run, on my spinning rods, I run P-line, 8 strand, 16 pound. It's literally designed, and it's pretty new, to be honest with you. I ran Power Pro for the longest time and just had so many problems with it. And when P-line came out with it, I gave it a shot and I just fell in love. And the braid never gains memory. Now, it does wear out. I will say I've had this on for about a year, and you can tell it's starting to fade. But depending on where I'm going, like let's say if I go to California or anywhere down south, I'm probably gonna tie on a 12 to 15 pound leader. And in some cases, I won't even tie a leader. I'll just hook straight 16 pound braid to whatever, you know, a shaky head, a wacky rig, really depending on how dirty that water is and how thick vegetation I'm pulling these fish out of. So that is an exception. For my spinning rod is the only thing that I go braid with a fluorocarbon leader, you know, because it's so much easier. Let's say if I'm back in my hometown in Utah and I want to go fish for smallmouth, you probably don't want 15 pound fluorocarbon on there. I'm an 8 to a 10 pound fluorocarbon for finessey things like a Ned rig, a wacky Cinco, a drop shot, and especially when that clear water comes into play. You know, you got dirty or clear water. This water's kind of, I don't know what you'd call it. It's brown, I guess you'd say. I'm fishing Hiram Reservoir today, and it's kind of dirty. So in my opinion, I could get away with 12. Easily 12 pound line, and that's what I have. I have 12 pound on the drop shot, and I have 12 pound on the shaky head. I haven't caught anything, but take it, I really haven't thrown it, to be honest with you. That jig bite is super fun. So let's go over to, we'll continue to talk about fluorocarbon. So for me, as I travel the world, it gets very, very expensive buying this spool of line costs $29, $30. Why do I use P-line? Because in my opinion, it's the best line out there. It has a little bit of memory, which that's super easy to fix. Like, you literally just stretch your line all the way out, hook it to something, and just pull it tight for 5 to 10 seconds. Memory's gone for another 3 weeks. So the strength that P-line has is unmatched by any other line. I've literally had so many problems with other lines, but not one problem have I had with P-line. Like, it is literally, and they just came out with this P-line Ultimate. This would be like more abrasive. They have I only use this and the P-line Tactical. This doesn't stretch, where the P-line Tactical does have a little stretch to it. So like if you want to flip around some brush and you're flipping, let's say you're flipping close, right? I had an instance where this happened. I was fishing the KBF DZ, the 10, and I literally had a jackhammer fish with 20-pound line, literally right at the nose of my boat. I just checked my line, literally the cast before. I know there was no like phrase or nothing, but I have a freaking too big of a hook set. I just lean on them bad boys and I rip, and it popped off right at, like, literally as soon as I said boom, and it had absolutely nothing to do with the line. It was completely my fault. Like, there's nothing else to say. Like, so that's where an instance where I would like to use the tactical, where it has that little bit more stretch. Maybe on a jerk bait, maybe on a crankbait, you know, anything with trebles. You know, obviously your rod is supposed to help with those treble baits. You want a little bit more give in that rod, and we'll talk about that another time. But if you have that line stretching and your rod, you have two things working together. But if I'm throwing a spinner bait, a jackhammer, a jig, a Texas rig, anything underwater, I'm always using the P-Line Ultimate, and that just has less stretch for me. As soon as I hook them, as soon as I hook set, boom, I'm cranking on that son of a gun, and I'm gonna get them to the boat as quick as I possibly can. We'll talk. So this would be a little setup too. So if we talked about line size, that really depends on the area that you are in the world. Like, if I go to Texas, I'm not throwing anything under 17 pound with like chatterbait, spinnerbait, jigs, and Texas rigs. And then I usually don't go above 25 pound. And my 25 pound is more for like 8 to 10 inch swim baits and stuff like that. But in most cases, I'm probably staying between 15 and 20 pounds all across the world. And you know, the clearer that water is, the lower you're gonna wanna go. The dirtier that water is, the more you can get away with. You know, for me, it's just safety. Why do I throw a jackhammer? Everyone was asking me at the tent house, why are you throwing a jackhammer on 20 pound? Like, what do you do? Dude, as soon as that thumb gun, I'm hitting them and I'm just cranking on them bad boys. I don't touch a net, I boat flip everything, especially with 17 pounds or more. When we get around that 15 pound, I try to be more careful when I boat flip. If it's 4 pounds and 15, if it's a 4 pound fish and I have 15 pound line, I'm probably gonna net it, but I'm not a good netter. So for me, why not go up one more line poundage or get that 17 to 20 pound and literally just boat flip everything you possibly can. And that's just, this is my opinion. Everyone has their own way of doing things, and a lot of other people are really good at netting fish. I'm not. Well, maybe it could be my net, but I had a longer one too for a long time and I still sucked. So I'm gonna stick with the heavier line so I can flip them in. So we talked about fluorocarbon. Let's talk about cranks and jerk baits. Typically with my crankbait, I never go below 12 or above 12. It's always 12 pound line for me with a crankbait. Now, if I want to get that crankbait deeper, obviously what do? You lower your line. If you don't want it to go as deep and you want this style of a profile, you get heavier line. But I always carry with me is 12 pounds spooled up. And then my jerk bait, I will go up to 12, and I probably should a lot more than I do. But in most cases, I've been able to get away for smallmouth, largemouth, right at 10 pounds, and it's done really good for me. Now, I will say the rod plays a huge part in that. As you see that yak rod right there, this is their jerkbait rod. You can see how much smaller it is. And we won't get too much into the rods, but the rod plays a huge role. You know, if I'm going to throw a Texas rig or a jig or anything like that, I'm probably going to have a medium heavy to a heavy, depending on what cover I'm sitting in. You know, when you go to those more finessey baits, I'm going to throw a medium light, an ultralight. Just like I typically never use an ultralight, but you kind of get the gist of what I'm saying. You want a little bit softer so you feel a little bit more, so they have a little bit more play, so for you to keep them pegged. Okay, let's talk about Yaquara, the frog. Favorite thing in the world is a frog. There's nothing else that I love more than frog fishing. For me, I use straight braid. And some spools are slick, like this spool on the inside is slick. And if you just put braid straight to it, the braid just spins. So you can't even use your drag, like so what I do is I put a fluorocarbon backing, maybe 12 to 15 pounds, maybe, I would say 30 yards, just enough to cover the spool up. So then I tie my fluorocarbon to my braid. Now this is why I say I don't use monofilament, is because in every case I've been able to use braid. And even I've been able to use braid underwater. I bet a lot of you have used braid underwater, you know, and y'all been fine. But when you get to those, also my opinion, when you get to those bigger fish and you want to graduate just from catching fish to start catching those giants, those fish are smart. You know, they've probably been caught 5 to 10 times in their lifetime, you know, depending on where that fish is or what area or any of that stuff. They're super smart. So you want to get away. If you can throw fluorocarbon and get away with it, by all means. Obviously not for the top water, in my opinion, especially fluorocarbon. Fluorocarbon is a no-go ever for top water, because the fluorocarbon sinks and your top water just is supposed to float, right? And it'll drag it down. It'll drag it down. Unless you are throwing a spur of the moment, you need one more rod and you can grab a whopper plopper or something like that, even like a buzz bait. You could use fluorocarbon for it, and that's just like you're on the water and you have to have that one more bait, because you can keep that rod tip up just reeling, and when you're reeling, that line will never touch the water. So then you don't have to worry about the line sinking and the lure following afterwards. So in every instance for me, it's either fluorocarbon or braid. There's literally no times that I could say, dang, I really wish I would have had the stretch of monofilament. For me, whenever I hook set that son of a gun, I want him pegged and my drag's turned all the way up on that braid. Now, when I have a whopper plopper or a popper, a spook, anything like that, I do adjust my drag, because when I don't set the hook on those fish, you just want to lean into them. As soon as they hit that, you just kind of want to lean into them. And I do want them, if they need to run, I want them to run, because it's a treble. That treble hook on those frogs, I don't let them run at all, because once I peg them, I'm skipping them across the water as fast as I possibly can to get them to my boat. I'm pretty sure that's it. I mean, that just kind of gives us a rundown, you know, like if swim baits, all those things, all I throw is P-Line Ultimate fluorocarbon. It is, in most of these spools, are probably 27 to 30 bucks a piece. I do a lot of line swapping from different state to different state, so I reuse so much. But I mean, a good all-around number, that 15 pound has literally got me through for, I guess when I was starting off fishing, it got me through so much. And until now, recently, you know, with me traveling all the world, I didn't swap out. I had 10 pound for the finesse fishing and 15 pound for everything else. And I don't know, I don't want to say that that'll do all y'all. That'll get y'all through and you'll be just fine. For me, I have a lot of things, you know, if I start to throw a mag draft or different techniques, I like to lower my line. It gives the lure a little bit more action. It lets the lure get deeper. So there's a lot of stuff that go into it. But I'm pretty sure that at least answers some of y'all's questions. And if y'all have any other questions, throw them in the comment about line, anything, rods, reels, what am I using, what gear ratio reels. So my next video will be what type of rods I use in those instances as well. Like when I throw a jig, what rod am I throwing on? What action? All that stuff. So I'm signing off. I'm gonna get out of here. These boats are kicking in and I'm gonna head on to the house. Gotta go help my wife with, I guess you call them my nephews, kids? Our grandchildren. No, they're not our grandchildren. Whatever. Peace out, guys. See y'all later.